There is a tool hanging in a barn in Holmes County, Ohio, that was forged in 1923. It has been used every single season for over 100 years. No rust, no pitting. The surface is dark, almost black, and so hard your fingernail cannot mark it. I pressed my thumbnail against the edge of that blade, and it felt like pressing against stone. The man who owns it told me his grandfather treated it the year it was made. Once. Just once. And then never again. Stay with me through the end of this video, because what I found in a military specification document that you can download for free from the Defense Logistics Agency website today will change how you look at every rusted hinge, every pitted fence post, every truck frame you have ever considered a lost cause. This works on metal you already own, no sandblasting, no grinding down to bare steel, no contractor, just a bottle of something dairy farmers have been buying since before most of us were born, and 15 minutes of your time. The first time I understood that Rust and I had a fundamentally different relationship than I needed to, I was on my knees in a gravel driveway in Holmes County, Ohio, looking at the underside of a farm wagon. The metal was 50 years old. It had been in weather its entire life, and it was not rusting. It had a dark, almost crystalline finish on every exposed iron surface. Not paint, not grease, something else. The Amish farmer who owned it watched me run my thumb across the frame and said something I did not understand at the time. He said they treated it when it was new and they have not thought about it since. I thought he meant some kind of sealant, something you buy. I had no idea he was describing a chemistry so old that evidence of its use has been found on iron artifacts from the 3rd century. Before I explain what he meant, let me tell you about a problem I lived with for 30 years. I had a 1979 Ford truck that I used for everything. Good truck, solid engine, the kind of vehicle that becomes part of the rhythm of your life. But the frame was a never-ending battle. Every spring, I was under it with a wire wheel, grinding down to bare metal, hitting it with rust converter, priming, painting, watching it come back by fall, wire wheel, primer, paint, repeat. I spent more time and money on that frame than I want to admit out loud, and it never felt like I was winning. It felt like I was managing a condition. I remember one particular afternoon in March, on my back, in cold mud, with a wire wheel in my hand, thinking that there had to be something I was missing. That men who worked with metal every day of their lives could not possibly be doing this. I was right, they were not. But it took me another 15 years to find out what they were doing instead. The answer to what I was doing wrong starts in 1869 with a British inventor named William Alexander Ross, who filed a patent for treating iron with phosphoric acid. He discovered that the acid changed the surface of the metal not by removing the rust, but by reacting with it chemically and converting it into something else entirely. The rust becomes iron phosphate, hard, crystalline, permanently bonded to the steel at the molecular level, not removed, converted. That is the distinction that changes everything, and it is the one that most hardware store products have been deliberately obscuring for decades. The chemistry sat in British patent records for nearly 40 years until an American named Clark W. Parker came across it. Parker did something that I have thought about every time I look at the Amish and their kitchen table approach to problems. He bought the patent rights from the British inventors, and he took the chemistry home, literally. Clark W. Parker experimented with phosphate coating formulations in his family kitchen in Detroit, tested batches, adjusted ratios, watched what happened to metal in his own sink, figured out what worked the way any practical person figures out what works, by doing it, observing it, and doing it again differently until the result holds. And in 1915, he and his son Wyman founded the Parker Rust-Proof Phosphating Company of America. The entire industrial legacy of rust-proofing metal in this country started in a man's kitchen, the same way every piece of knowledge on this channel started in someone's barn or someone's field or someone's grandmother's recipe book. That fact has never stopped impressing me. the most durable metal protection process in American military history, developed over a kitchen sink in Detroit by a man who simply decided to find out for himself. By the late 1930s, the Parker process had been refined to the point where it could be run at scale, cheaply, using materials the United States had ready access to, which turned out to matter enormously because in 1941, the country needed to produce firearms by the millions, and those firearms needed to work in mud, in rain, in salt air, in conditions that would destroy conventional paint or bluing within weeks. The military turned to phosphate conversion coating. Every M1 Garand that came off the Springfield Armory production line was Parkerized, treated with a phosphate solution that converted the surface of the steel into a dark crystalline armor. The process cost under 3 cents per rifle. You can handle a 1942 production Garand in a museum today and find the original coating still present, still intact, 80 plus years later. 3 cents, 80 years. I have to say those two numbers together every time I think about what I was spending on branded rust products for my truck, because the contrast still gets me. The active Department of Defense specification for manganese phosphate coating is called MILDT L16232. It is not classified. It is not archived. You can pull it up on the Defense Logistics Agency website right now and read every requirement the U.S. military still applies to this chemistry, because they still use it. They have used it continuously without interruption since World War II. The military never stopped. They never switched to something newer, something fancier, something that required a subscription or a service call. They kept using the same phosphoric acid conversion chemistry that a man worked out in his Detroit kitchen in 1915 because it still outperforms everything else for the cost. That is the part that got me, not the history. The continuous use, 80 years of continuous military use with no reason to change, while the consumer market built a wall of branded products between you and the raw material and charged you $40 for the privilege of not knowing which aisle to walk down. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people with farm equipment or people restoring old trucks, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. The most practically useful application of this chemistry is on the metal you already have, your fence posts, your gate hardware, your truck frame, your tractor, your lawnmower deck, your outdoor tool handles, the hinges on the barn door that have been shedding rust onto the concrete for years, the brackets holding your mailbox that you repaint every other spring and watch turn orange by August. Any iron or steel surface that is currently rusting or will rust can be treated this weekend for the price of a fast food lunch. No contractor, no permits, no sandblasting equipment to rent, a gallon of Milkstone remover, a spray bottle, a foam brush, gloves, and eye protection. That is the complete materials list. Here is how the Amish in Lancaster County and Holmes County have been approaching this for generations. But before we proceed, let me share that there's more to the Amish than just about solution to rust. Theirs is the same pattern across the entire home, using simple, overlooked materials instead of expensive systems. That's how the Amish approach water, heating, even fuel. I put all of it into one guide, the Amish Home System. Same idea as this, proven methods, fraction of the cost. Link is in the description. Their farm supply co-ops carry phosphoric acid as milkstone remover. It is what dairy farmers use to clean milk lines and milking equipment. The acid breaks down the calcium deposits, the milkstone that build up in dairy operations. The product has been in farm supply stores for decades because dairy farmers need it continuously. The Amish figured out long ago that the same acid they were buying to clean their milking equipment was the best thing they had ever used on iron tools and farm equipment. They did not call it Parkerizing. They did not read MILDT L16232. They called it treating the metal, and they did it the same way they do everything because it worked, it was cheap, and it was already in the supply order. The brand at Tractor Supply is called Dairyland Milkstone Remover. It is 56% phosphoric acid. 1 gallon costs between $12 and $20 depending on where you buy it. Compare that to OSPHO, which you will find at Ace Hardware or automotive stores, which is 43% phosphoric acid and costs nearly $40 a gallon. Milkstone remover is stronger and costs half the price. The vintage Mustang forum community figured this out years ago. A mechanic with 20 years of experience posted what I consider to be the most useful single sentence I found in all my research on this topic. There is nothing special about OSPHO except the expensive price. It is just a 43% dyed phosphoric acid solution. Same molecule, different aisle, different label, different price. Naval jelly at the hardware store, phosphoric acid in gel form. Bare concrete rust stain remover at Home Depot, phosphoric acid in the concrete cleaning aisle. POR. 1.5 at $30 per quart. A phosphoric acid-based coating with a polymer added, and a significant marketing budget. They are all selling you the same chemistry that Clark Parker worked out in his kitchen, and that the U.S. military has been applying to its firearms for 80 years. The consumer rust treatment market is not a technology story, it is a labeling story. I tested this on the 1979 Ford frame that I had been wire wheeling and priming for decades. I bought a gallon of milkstone remover from the farm supply store, $12.80. I stood in the aisle for longer than I should have, reading the label, looking at the concentration, doing the math on what I had been paying for OSPHO for years, and feeling the specific quiet frustration of a man who has just realized he has been walking past the answer every time he drove to the hardware store. I mixed it roughly 10 parts water to 1 part acid in a spray bottle. You want a working concentration of somewhere between 10 and 25% for surface treatment on a vehicle frame. Gloves on, safety glasses on. Phosphoric acid at any concentration will cause chemical burns, and you want to be careful about ventilation. That is not optional information, and I am not going to bury it. I sprayed the frame sections and let the acid sit for about 15 minutes. What happened next is the thing I keep coming back to when I think about this chemistry. The rust did not dissolve, it changed color. Right in front of me. The orange-brown iron oxide darkened to a deep blue-black as the iron phosphate formed. I could see the conversion happening. The rust was not being removed, it was being recruited, turned from an enemy into armor, exactly the way the Amish farmer in Holmes County described the treatment on his 50-year-old wagon frame in words I did not understand until that afternoon in my driveway. It took me 2 decades and $12 to understand what he had said in 30 seconds. The sound steel underneath did not react. Phosphoric acid has an extraordinary property. It distinguishes between rust and intact metal. It finds the rust, converts it, and leaves the good steel alone. This is why you do not need to sandblast. You do not need to grind down to bare metal. You do not need to remove the rust first. The acid needs the rust to work. You leave the tight rust in place, apply the acid, let the conversion happen, and what you have afterward is not rust anymore. It is a stable phosphate compound that actually holds paint and lubricant better than bare metal does. I let the first application dry completely. This matters. And the one thing that will ruin the treatment is applying water before the acid has fully dried, which produces a white powdery residue that has to be mechanically removed. Dry completely, then apply a second coat. The first coat handles surface rust. The second coat penetrates deeper into pits and weld seams where the rust has gone further into the metal. 2 coats. That is it. I drove that truck for another 4 years and never touched the frame again. No wire wheel, no primer session in the spring, no starting over. I checked it periodically. The way you check something you are not sure you can trust yet, the way you keep looking at a repaired fence post after a hard winter, expecting to find failure and finding none. It held. Every treated surface held. The untreated sections I had left as a comparison continued to rust through. Same truck, same weather, same road salt and freeze-thaw cycles. The difference was $12 in one afternoon in the driveway. That result is not a coincidence. It is a consequence of chemistry that the military has been relying on for 80 years and that the consumer products industry has been selling back to us at a significant markup ever since. Let me tell you what the coatings industry understood and acted on, because it is the same pattern that runs through every piece of knowledge on this channel. Phosphoric acid cannot be patented. It is a naturally occurring compound. Any idiot with a farm supply store nearby can buy it for $12 a gallon. There is no proprietary molecule, no trade secret. No reason a consumer cannot go directly to the raw material and skip the $40 branded version entirely. What cannot be patented cannot generate licensing revenue. What cannot generate licensing revenue cannot sustain a marketing budget. What has no marketing budget disappears from public knowledge within a generation. And what disappears from public knowledge gets replaced by products that can be patented, branded, and sold at a significant markup, products whose primary innovation is not the chemistry but the label. I think about the years I spent on that Ford frame and I feel a very specific kind of frustration, not at the products I was buying. Most of them work in the limited way they are designed to work. The frustration is at what I was not told. I was never told that I was buying a version of something available in a different form at a fraction of the price. I was never told that the chemistry inside the branded bottle had been continuous U.S. military practice since 1942. I was never told that the reason the rust came back every spring was not that the product failed, but that a product designed to wear off and need replacing had performed exactly as its designers intended. That is a different kind of failure, and the people who experienced it most were the men who spent the most time outdoors working metal the hardest, checking that frame every spring and reaching for the wire wheel again. The $200 billion coatings industry depends on one operational assumption: that you will go back to the hardware store in 2 to 3 years because whatever you bought last time wore off. Phosphoric acid conversion does not wear off. It is not a coating sitting on top of the metal waiting to be scratched or chipped or worn through. It is a chemical change to the surface of the metal itself. A scratch does not compromise it because there is no film to break. The protection is inside the grain, not on top of it. That is the same reason the parkerizing on a 1,942 Garand is still present after 80 years. The chemistry does not have a repeat purchase cycle. The industry does not promote chemistry that does not have a repeat purchase cycle. So most people never heard of milkstone remover as a rust treatment. They know OSPHO, they know naval jelly, they know POR 15. They do not know that all three are selling them a version of the same thing that is sitting in a different aisle at the farm supply store for $12 a gallon. The Amish never had a reason to forget this. Their farm supply order has included phosphoric acid milkstone remover for as long as dairy farming has been part of their communities. They never needed a hardware store to rename it and mark it up. They already had it. They treated their tools with it and their equipment with it and their fence hardware with it, and they did not think about rust again for a generation because they did not need to. The first time I fully understood the scope of what the Amish have preserved, not just this one piece of knowledge, but an entire catalog of solutions that never made it into the consumer market because they could not be patented, branded, and sold at a markup. I was sitting at a kitchen in Lancaster County with a family I had been visiting for the better part of a decade. The mother brought out a set of tools that had belonged to her husband's grandfather. Cast iron, handled implements, forged steel working tools, the kind of hand tools that were made to last a century and did. I asked how they kept them from rusting. The answer was so simple that I sat there for a moment, not quite believing it. Same bottle they use for the milking lines, she said. Has been for as long as anyone can remember. That is the Amish approach to every problem on this channel. Not searching for a new product, not calling a contractor, looking at what is already in the supply order and asking what else it can do. The passive solar window rule that Penn State Extension confirmed reduces heating load by 30 to 40%. The $12 water collection setup. The biogas barrel that converts kitchen scraps into cooking gas for under $80 in materials. All of it documented and assembled into a single guide called the Amish Home System. Link is in the description. Designed for homes already built, not for new construction. A 7-day implementation plan for the person who is done paying for things that their grandparents handled without writing a check. The rust treatment is one chapter. The guide is the whole story. There are two things you should never put phosphoric acid on, and I will say both of them clearly because the consequences are not trivial. Springs of any kind. The acid causes hydrogen embrittlement in spring steel and will destroy the tension either immediately or in use afterward. A spring weakened this way may not fail the first time you use it, but it will fail. Never springs. The second is non-ferrous metals, aluminum, brass, copper, stainless steel. The acid will attack them. Iron and steel only. Read the label on whatever product you buy. Verify it is phosphoric acid and not hydrochloric acid, which some milkstone removers contain and which is significantly more aggressive and will eat your sound metal. Wear gloves, wear eye protection, work with ventilation. These are not suggestions. Now, the climax of this story is the part that finally made the whole picture click for me. The detail I kept coming back to after all the research was done. Clark W. Parker bought 2 patents from British inventors, took them home, and worked out the chemistry in his kitchen. In 1915, he founded a company. By 1942, his company's process was coating every firearm the U.S. military produced. A man in a kitchen in Detroit, working alone, adjusting a solution based on what he observed, arriving at a chemistry that would protect the weapons of the largest military mobilization in American history. That detail has stayed with me because it sounds exactly like every Amish solution I have ever encountered on this channel. Not a laboratory, not a corporation. A person with access to the raw material, the patience to test it, and the common sense to recognize when something worked. The Parker Rust-Proof Company is still operating in Cleveland, Ohio today. 100 years from that kitchen, still applying genuine Parkerizing, the only remaining original job shop licensee still using the coating that won World War II. When I found that detail, I sat with it for a few minutes. 100 years of continuous use, from a kitchen experiment to military firearms to the Amish co-op order for milkstone remover, and the consumer market still does not know which aisle to walk down. And in every dairy farming community in America, including every Amish community in Lancaster County and Holmes County, the same phosphoric acid that built that century-long legacy has been sitting on a shelf at the co-op, labeled as milkstone remover, bought by farmers for cleaning equipment, quietly applied to iron tools and fence hardware and tractor frames for generations, because the Amish never needed someone to tell them the right aisle. They already knew what was in their supply order. They already knew what worked. The knowledge did not need to be recovered. It just needed someone to walk into the farm supply store instead of the hardware store and ask what the dairy farmers used to clean their equipment. You were never supposed to make that connection. You were supposed to buy the $40 bottle with the rust on the label, go back in 2 years for another one, and never ask what was in the $12 bottle 2 aisles over. The military knew, the Amish knew, the mechanic with 20 years of experience who posted on the Vintage Mustang forum knew, and now you know. I think about that March afternoon, on my back in the mud, with the wire wheel. I was not doing anything wrong. I was doing exactly what the products I had bought were designed to make me do. Going back to the hardware store. Starting the cycle again. The frustrating part is not that I was fooled. I was not fooled. Exactly. I was just never given a reason to walk past the branded shelf and into the farm supply aisle. Nobody told me. The people who knew either worked in dairy farming or worked on military firearms, and neither group had a reason to tell a man with a rusting truck frame what they were using. Bryson's grandfather told his grandson. The Amish farmer's grandmother told her. Clark Parker told his son. The knowledge moves the way all real knowledge moves, from one person to another, in kitchens and barns and farm supply co-ops, without anyone writing a press release about it. The rust on whatever metal you are looking at right now is not a condition to manage. It is a raw material. $12.15 turns it into armor. If you have a rusted piece of equipment, a truck frame, a gate hinge, a set of hand tools, or anything made of iron or steel that you have been fighting with, a wire wheel and a prayer, drop a comment below with what it is and how long you have been fighting it. Tell me the year you first noticed the rust, what you tried, and whether you have been winning or just keeping it at bay. I read every one, and your answers tell me exactly where to go next. This audience has metal that deserves better treatment than it has been getting, and I want to know what it is. Hit subscribe. Not for me, for what comes next. Because the next video covers what the Amish use on their wooden tool handles and barn siding that works on the same principle as what you just learned about the metal, a liquid treatment that converts the surface rather than coating. It that costs almost nothing, and that the lumber treatment industry spent decades burying under a wall of branded products. Same pattern, different material. One more piece of a system that has been hiding in plain sight in the farm supply store for your entire life. The Parker Rust-Proof Company started in a kitchen. The Amish figured it out at the co-op. The military put it on every rifle they made for 80 years. The knowledge was never classified. It was just in the wrong aisle.